Hey guys, welcome back to the Podcast. If you don't know who we are, we're a platform for young people to express their views on current issues. If you have any opinions you would like to share, please follow us on Instagram at Podcast to get in touch with us. Also make sure to subscribe and review on iTunes, that'd be great. We've also got Twitter, which we just launched, where we'll be posting articles and stuff like that at Podcast. In today's episode, we're joined by David Ruggles-Tome, special guest, and we will be talking about the Colin Kaepernick protests, and talking a bit about Black Lives Matter a bit later as well. Okay, that's cool then. So Colin Kaepernick has been last couple of years. Well, we've heard quite a lot about this guy. He's an American football player, and it basically started on August the 14th, 2016. Is when this all started. Colin Kaepernick, San Francisco's 49ers quarterback at the time, was basically spotted by, I think it was, I'm not sure, it was just someone in the crowd. He was sitting during the national anthem, and this was kind of just out of the norm because at sports events, and if you know, like
everyone stands.
Yeah, you stand up for the national anthem, the players.
Especially in America, it's it's a really big thing.
You have to take off your hat and everything.
Yeah. So this was just a preseason game against the Green Bay Packers. And basically he said after the game as an explanation when he was questioned about it, I'm not going to stand up to show pride for in a flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of colour. To me, this is bigger than football, and it would be selfish to me to look the other way. There's a lot of things going on that are unjust, that people aren't being held accountable for, and that something needs to change. One specifically is police brutality. There's people being murdered unjustly and not being held accountable, cops being paid leave for killing people. It's not right by anyone's standards. So we see a prominent sports figure right now talking about society and using his position of, well, he's got eyes on him to make a statement, and I guess it was gutsy because if we go through it, and wait, let me just get into this. People know him for kneeling. He basically started originally sitting, but then he began to kneel, which is basically out of respect for the U.S. military. He appreciates what they've done. At the end of the day, they have fought for him, and so he did that out of respect for current and former members of the U.S. military. Basically, then later on he becomes a free agent. He terminates his contract, and is basically unable to find a new team, and is still to this day unemployed. Doesn't have a team. And this has led to him filing a lawsuit, thinking that NFL owners aren't hiring him because of the protests and not because of his ability. And lots of prominent figures have came in and gave their opinion. Donald Trump, the US president, in 2017, September 2017, he took notice and started slating Kaepernick and others doing the same thing. There was other American footballers and other prominent sports figures.
It became pretty popular. There was definitely times where every NFL Sunday there'd be people kneeling.
Yeah, I think for the Steelers there was the whole team didn't come out for the national anthem apart from one player. Because their coach is African American as well, so I think he was encouraging their players to do it.
Yeah. So Donald Trump's quote was wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a bitch out of our field right now, he's fired. A lot of hysteria around his comment as usual for Donald Trump, but it was basically a negative outlook on what Kaepernick was doing. He's obviously not very happy about what he's doing, and Kaepernick files a suit against the NFL about the whole not hiring him thing in October 2017. And then in May 2018, NFL tried to do something. They announced a new policy, which is that it's to do with protests. If you can stay in the dressing room during the national anthem, but if you stay in the field, you have to stand. This wasn't met with great support from the NFL Players Association, and that was put on hold. That policy, and then we saw the Nike advert as well, and. Recently, end of 2018, the believe in something even if it means sacrificing everything, in reference to Kaepernick. So there's a lot of debate around whether or not his action, Kaepernick's protest, was the right thing to do, the right way to handle it, whether or not it was unpatriotic. Let's just start with that. Do you guys think it was unpatriotic what he did?
Well, I think first it's important to note that in America it's a big deal to kneel during a national anthem. It's a different culture over there, really. When they mentioned that before. So as far as that, it could be considered unpatriotic, but I think it's unreasonable to ask anyone to stop to stand or force anyone to stand. It's ultimately freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and I think it's completely fair.
Do you think it's unpatriotic though what he did?
I think he did it as a sign on. He did it as a sign of unpatriotic. I think that's what he was going for.
I think he tried to be unpatriotic.
Yeah.
I think you could actually argue otherwise. I don't think he did it because he dislikes his country. I actually think maybe he did it because he cares a lot about his country and that he actually wants his country to change.
Yeah, I'd argue that like greatest thinkers have said, quote unquote, dissent is the greatest form of patriotism. If you really love something, you're not going to sit by when it's doing like rubbish, right? What you're going to do is like, if your kid's like doing drugs, you're going to try and get a kid off drugs. That's dissent. You're not just like following blindly, and I say that's patriotism.
I think the action of just kneeling for a national anthem, that is in itself patriotic, and that was the statement he was trying to make. It was this big unpatriotic statement which looks unpatriotic, but his real reasons was for like the betterment of his country. So I think if Donald Trump is saying,
so I'd say if his reasons for doing it were for the betterment of the country, then it's a patriotic action.
I think I agree. I don't think his actions were unpatriotic. If his means behind the actions was because he actually dislikes the country, he actually hates America, then that would be unpatriotic. But the fact that he's doing it because he cares about his nation, he cares about the people of his nation, I think that's actually in itself patriotic.
Yeah, if he was like, I knelt because I don't like America, unpatriotic. If he's like, I knelt because America's not doing well right now, and I think they need to actually take a serious look at themselves, I think I see that as true patriotism.
What was his quote that he said after he did this?
He says he wouldn't show pride in a flag for a country that like he's not proud of his country right now. I don't think that is patriotic in itself.
Can you really describe?
He cares about his country, but he's not proud of it right now.
I think patriotism is loving your country.
Yeah.
And I think if you love your country, you're going to like quote unquote hate it when it's at its worst, but you're going to try and get it to its best.
Yeah, I think obviously, you could have different understandings of the word unpatriotic.
Yeah, we've got the definition here. I mean, definitions, dictionary definitions, like if we take them with a pinch of salt, but it's devotion and vigorous support for one's country. He's
Absolutely.
He's not supporting his country. Yeah. He's looking out for his country.
Yeah, but I think you would say he's devoted to making his country better.
I say devotion to your country. 100% he was being devoted to.
But
his country.
He's not supporting his country. He's not like supporting
he's actively
what's happening in his country right now.
Yeah, he's actively against what's happening in his country right now.
Yeah, but like, would you say that you're being unpatriotic or?
I think patriotism is just a term that's quite subjective, right?
Yeah,
it's semantics at this point.
Yeah.
Okay. That's very interesting. We got Barack Obama talking about in a CNN interview about freedom of expression and things like that. It's obviously one of the pillars that underpins like U.S. democracy, and he basically talked. I think it was very interesting. Let me just try and get the quote here. He basically said that freedom of speech is easy. Is good when it's easy. Like, so when you want your a change to be made, like when it's positive, seen as positive, but you have to also accept it when it's bad as well. And Barack Obama didn't support what Kaepernick did, but he supported the fact that he was exercising his right to freedom of speech. And I think you have to notice that. And in that sense, he's entitled to do that. I don't think that's a question. It's just whether or not he was right. I think that's very interesting, the Kaepernick case. And
I think a key thing to shut down is people would argue that, okay, he's got the freedom to protest, he got freedom of speech, but because the NFL is a private company, they were absolutely within their rights to do it. But I think when you resort to that argument, on a matter of principle, you're losing. If you're saying, okay, fair enough, he does have the right to freedom of speech, but because NFL is a private company, he doesn't have freedom of speech, you lose the argument on principle.
You can have freedom of speech if you're going to be prosecuted against what you say.
Okay, I think Kaepernick's very interesting. It's topical. I think we'll see that story progress. But this is the reason why we got David in here today. We're going to be Colin Kaepernick. Basically, he alluded to the oppression of black people and police brutality, and of course that is closely linked to the Black Lives Matter movement, which has been prominent in recent years and has sparked a lot of debate. And we know David's got a strong opinion on that as well. So it basically started. I'll give it a bit of context. I'll try and keep this short as possible. It started as hashtag in 2013. After in 2012, Trayvon Martin was shot dead by George Zimmerman, who was basically a neighborhood watch volunteer that claimed to shoot he claimed to shoot Trayvon Martin in self-defense, the problem was that he was cleared of all charges completely, even if it was in self-defense. I'm pretty sure that is still by the law some way chargeable. And it re-emerged hugely in 2014 as well, when Michael Brown was shot by a Missouri white police officer, Darren Wilson, and this there was protests that took place under the Black Lives Matter banner, which attracted loads of people as well. So let's just give a bit of context around the Black Lives Matter movement. We've talked a lot about police brutality in those two cases, which have really popularized the movement. In the Washington Post, there was 990 fatal shootings in 2015, according to the Washington Post, by the way, by police in the USA. Of the 3 unarmed civilians that were killed here, 40% were black, despite the fact that black people make up only 13% of the population. 13% of the population are black people. That's a huge stat that you need to remember for the rest of the episode, by the way, because I think that's going to be quite important. And we don't need to repeat it all the time as well. And Alicia Garza, one of the co-founders of the movement, said that Black Lives Matter is not just about police violence, but about the wide range of ways in which state-sanctioned violence against black people impacts our lives. For example, it looks like black women making 63 cents to every dollar that white men make, and the 79 cents that white women make, which is basically showing about the pay gap between black and white people in America. And our goal is to build the kind of society where black people can live in with dignity and respect. We're not trying to build a world where black people are empowered and white people aren't, or where there's black supremacy. That wouldn't make things better. So yeah, we've seen loads of riots and things like that. There was one riot in 2015 which cost $9 million. Let's just get into the debate right now, for and against. David, let's just start with you. What do you think about the Black Lives Matter movement?
Okay, well, you mentioned there being economic differences between the race. So what was that statistic? It was 63 cents, black woman, 63 cents every dollar a white man makes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can divide ethnic groups, any ethnic group, however you want. So if you take, say, white Russians, and you take white people who are descended from France, you'll find that for every dollar that a white person descended from Russia makes, a white person descended from France, they'll make 79 cents. Okay, and if this statistic was the same throughout, if the statistic was for white and black people, they would use that statistic to say, okay, this ergo there's racism, because there's a disparity. There's white and black, but because we know there's not racism here, because both these ethnic groups would identify as white. They're white from the white people are descended from France. The white people.
You could argue that they identify as Russian and French, like.
And also, like, you're giving two examples of real minorities, so there could be like anomalies that skew that. We're talking about 13% of the population here, which is quite a big chunk.
Let me finish my thoughts.
Sorry about
that. That's okay. My point is there will be differences in median wealth income, household income, that sort of thing throughout all of the ethnic minorities and majorities that there are in the world. And I think there are a lot of other factors which go into what makes these these differences occur. And I think immediately assuming that it's racism which is creating these gaps is actually it's a jump in logic. It's unfounded, if you could say.
I disagree. I think there's a cycle in which black people face. I don't know. Should I go through that now? I just kind of devised this, and I saw this being bandied around as well. So if we talk about police brutality and things like that, like, let me find this actually. Like, you know what? Should we leave that?
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Police brutality. So, let's just get some stats on that. Unarmed black men are twice as likely to be shot by the police in 2015, according to The Guardian. 13% of the U.S. population is African American. We saw that. Whilst 5% of people killed by the police are black. It shows pretty much double the chance if you're black compared to normal.
So David, if obviously you see that there's there's a disparity there between the amount of white people shot and black people shot, especially when they're unarmed. Would you say that is because there is racism, or what would you put that down to then, if that's occurring?
Okay. There are other statistics out there. If you look at the cases where it comes to resisting arrest, white people actually are more likely to get shot. Whether that's there are other factors involved, but in terms of not resisting arrest, what was it?
It was like black unarmed males.
Right. Okay.
Are twice as likely to get shot than unarmed
by the police.
By the police.
Is that
white?
Is that taking into account all the amount of crime that black people commit?
Okay, let's do that then, because black people they do commit more crime.
Yeah.
But would you say would you say that could be due to like the sort of societies that they live in? Do you think that's due to the fact that they have black skin, or do you think that's actually due to like other factors such as addiction, poverty, intergenerational crime?
There are a lot of other factors at play other than police racism. I'm not saying that there isn't police racism out there, but I'm saying there's a lot more. There's a lot more of a complicated question to ask. It's not simply white cops are shooting black people. It's white cops. They're going into areas which are impoverished, generally less educated. I don't see it as a race problem. I see it more as a poverty problem. I think that's generally what it boils down to.
Do you think the two are mutually exclusive? I would argue that race and poverty in the United States, especially in the terrible welfare system they have, is hugely linked.
Because, well, let me just get a stat here. Well, we see that. Sorry about this. I've got a lot here. Well, we saw it before, didn't we? Like the black woman earned 63 cents, 79 cents compared to the white
male.
That's the white woman as well. 79, so that's just a clear gap, and that shows that obviously.
Yeah, but it's the same gap it's the same gap that there is between, as I said, white people of Russian descent and white people of French descent. But we know there's no racism between these two people because they were both identified as white. So what are the factors that are played to cause that thing? There must be other factors. Basically, what I'm saying is that all the evidence that we have suggests that even with no racial differences, there would still be wealth divides between.
Why does that have to be a thing?
What do you mean?
Why will there always be race divides?
Because you can there are more factors. Asians in America are doing vastly better. They're currently there's something like in top universities they're making 40% of the something like that. And I think it's fair to say that there are differences between there are differences in how people are brought up and sort of thing. I mean, it's cultural differences. It's under that wide bracket. Why are there so many Asians doing so well in America, while black people aren't graduating? I think it's under a wider range than just to do with. Let's put this into words.
But black people still aren't graduating either way.
What I'd argue is that I would argue that
why aren't black people graduating?
I would argue that America is institutionally racist against black people. Like, black people just have an inherent disadvantage in America.
In what way?
There's laws that disproportionately affect black people.
Are you referring to the marijuana?
Well, I'm not just referring. There are other laws, but if I'm just talking about marijuana for a second, studies show that black people and white people generally smoke weed at around the same rate, right? However, black people are 4 times more likely to be arrested for it, and in some states 8 times more likely. And then, I know what you're gonna say. You're gonna say it's because these areas are more policed or whatever. There's more calls. But if you take a case study, right, residents in a Canarsie project in New York, which is a predominantly black neighborhood, have 4 times the amount of weed arrests than the predominantly white neighborhood Greenpoint, despite having around the same amount of policing and the same amount of call-ins.
Right.
So I think we see that often police officers may see a white person smoking weed, but they're just going to turn a blind eye. Whereas I think what you see is that black people, when a white officer sees a black person smoking weed, they're more likely to arrest them.
Okay, I think it's a bit presumptive to say that when police see white people smoking marijuana, they're just going to turn a blind eye. I think it's unfair.
Well, I mean, when white people and black people smoke at the same rate, black people smoke more. I think that speaks for itself.
Okay, I tend to agree with you. There are plenty of studies that show that people will associate quicker with people of their own race, and people they affiliate more. You can actually this is the same. It was the same both ways. If you're in a black community, you affiliate and you associate yourself better with people that are black, and the same for white. As far as that goes, yes, there might be unconscious things that could lead to these disparities, and I'm not saying that there isn't.
What I'm saying is these disparities are why. That's just an example of one law, but I'm sure there's more. These disparities are why black people are just inherently at a disadvantage, and that is why they earn less money, and like that is why culturally they may be doing like.
Yeah. Okay. If there was I thought you'd bring up the courtroom scenario where black people were getting slightly longer sentences.
Yeah.
Right. For that situation, I think given that there should be judges which you can identify are slightly specific judges, groups of judges or whatever, but there should be specific areas where you can identify that black people are being sentenced higher. And in these areas, I think it's perfectly reasonable to say, okay, there could be some unconscious or explicit racism going on there, and you should. I think it's reasonable to implement measures to try and reduce that. Be that sensitivity training or what?
Body cameras.
Body cam. Oh yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah. I have no real issue with that. I think there's often
the
jumps.
crux of the Black Lives Matter movement and what the debate is whether there is police brutality, like unfair bias against black people, and whether there is institutional racism against black people, right? That's like the crux of what Black Lives Matter is. So I think kind of straying from that a bit now. So I would argue, I'm assuming you don't believe that there is a police bias against black people, right?
I think it might be unconscious bias, but I would like to see that it's hard to prove that there's explicit bias.
Yeah, that's true, but I think even an unconscious bias is still not.
Well, in terms of, are you talking about an unconscious bias when a white officer sees a black person, they're probably more frightened than if they see a white person?
That sort of thing, yeah.
That's wrong.
I'm agreeing with you. There's a study there's studies that show that.
That's what the Black Lives Matter movement is arguing.
Surely that shows that in like America there is an institutionally racist culture which is making this unconscious bias exist.
Yeah, because it needs to come from somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. And it's probably coming from the fact. Well, we know that black people commit more crimes. We've seen that. For example, 37% of the prison population are black compared to fact with 13. So I think we can assume that black people do commit more crimes, just statistically, and we need to know why that's happening. That's happening because of things like poverty.
Yeah.
Granted that, you cited the Guardian article earlier where it says unarmed black people are twice as likely to be killed by police than white people. Why does black people committing more crime? Why should that have any effect on unarmed black people having?
I'm not trying to justify police here. I'm saying that police are probably doing it because they see black people as more of a crime threat. And you need to understand why that's the case.
What I'm arguing is it doesn't matter whether black people commit more crime, but if an officer sees a black person unarmed, why are they shooting them?
Well, I think they're assuming that they're committing a crime. I think.
Why are you shooting them?
There will be in these individual cases. There will be threat to the police officer. There may be the occasional case where
unarmed though. But a police officer has a right. A police officer has a handgun against an unarmed black man. He's at an inherent advantage where he can dissolve the situation peacefully and just make a civil arrest.
All I'm suggesting is there may be mitigating factors. That's it. Which there probably is. I'm not condoning it, but you have to take it on an individual case basis.
The point is, despite mitigating factors, a black person whilst unarmed in an altercation with the police is twice as likely to be killed by a white person in an altercation with the police who's also unarmed.
Which is inherently unfair.
Yeah. What Black Lives Matter is arguing is why is a black person why in an altercation with police why is it more common for a shooting to occur between a black person and a white cop than a white person and a white cop?
Do you think that's because there is an unconscious bias due to
there will be factors such as unconscious bias.
And why is there
I think you need to understand why is there an unconscious bias.
Do you think there's
I think what the study seems to suggest is that it's sort of natural, almost evolution-esque tribalism, which makes us associate better with the people of our own color. It's a little abstract, but it's got something to do with.
It's just
how we grew up.
See, I think that's quite naive, or not naive. I just think it's quite stubborn to think that we're always gonna have an unconscious bias and we'll never get over that. Considering we've made a lot.
I think it's personally reasonable to say that the people we surround ourselves with are the people that we will become more comfortable around.
Why is that relevant?
There we go.
Yeah.
You just argued that you're more comfortable around the people you grew up around, right?
Yeah.
The whole issue is that these are the white people living in the suburbs, surrounded by other white people, whilst the black people are living in the hood, right? Alright? Inherently, these black people are earning less money, and therefore they're growing up separated from these white people. That's the issue here. The fact that these black people aren't earning like they're set up in a society that doesn't like help them earn a lot of money.
And because of that, they commit more crimes, and that gives
Yes.
them this tag.
Yeah,
it
so
just
there's
further
a-
feeds into this cycle.
Yeah,
there's
and then
a cultural
amplifies
issue
it.
there. So
Yes, you need to break the cycle somehow, and you break the cycle by
having
changing like outlook on black people, whether it
yeah,
be by
by having the
policy
Black Lives
measures.
Matter
Okay,
movement,
okay.
which
Yeah.
actually
But I think
this is-
brings
okay,
awareness.
whoa.
The reason they're growing up in different areas is because of wealth inequality, right? That can be determined.
yes.
And wealth inequality, you can link that back to racism.
I think there is a cultural divide here, which is an issue. But I also believe that you have to be very careful about how you deal with. Okay, if we take affirmative action isn't if you're basing it purely off race is a pretty awful thing to do.
I don't think they do that.
I think that is exactly what they do.
Not purely off race.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to take affirmative action off poverty, people who are given loads of opportunities in life, given easy education, good education, versus someone who isn't, that's a perfectly reasonable thing to say. Okay, the person who hasn't been given these opportunities has probably worked harder.
Right.
However,
Do
you're basing it purely off race, which is what I think some of these universities are doing.
Is it not fair to just say a black person and a white person have the exact same credentials for uni, and like they've got the exact same qualifications, they're equally qualified? It's not fair to give it to the African American in a society that is ultimately run by
institutionally,
like.
and it's like, Paul, yeah, because
No.
you don't
Why
think
not?
it is.
Because it was based on an individual basis. If that white person came from a horrible background,
No, but I'm saying if they were exactly the same,
But it's
and there's only one spot, surely it's fair to give it to the black person.
I don't see why you would why you would choose anyone over that in that situation where they're literally identical. They come from the same area.
Well, because because
we're saying
being
that one
black
of them
is
needs to
harder
be-
than being white in America.
Yeah,
Just
that has to
It
be one
is.
one
Yeah,
of
that-
the factors that you consider. Like,
I'm saying if they're
Maybe if it's come down to the wire, you could argue that.
yeah, that's what.
That-
I don't see
but-
why you
but-
don't need to argue, why you can't, why you shouldn't factor that in. Like, tell me why
yeah,
you
but I
shouldn't
think
factor that in.
yeah, but the problem is over-escalating, over amplifying the racism in America.
But we're not over amplifying anything when there is a problem that leads to them being disadvantaged.
Yeah,
We've
but
shown that for the last 20 minutes.
It's going to be when it comes to people who come from the same area, the same suburbs. There's going to be a much smaller difference in education. In terms of the racism in a really wealthy neighborhood, I fail to recognize it. And in a really wealthy neighborhood, maybe
Okay,
when it
let's just
comes-
talk.
Okay.
Let's just talk. Both these families are from like lower middle class like backgrounds.
Mhm.
So we'll talk about. We're not talking about like the richest kids right now, whose dads are like billionaires. We're talking about like, just like normal kids.
Okay, kids from our kind of like similar.
So those black kids will probably find themselves.
They will
some-
face. I think they'd
some
face
kind
more
of racism
pressure,
that-
more hardships than
that
a white
will-
person would.
Just a
Even if
normal
it
black
comes down
kid.
to just like
Even-
racist like heckles at school, like that's
Yeah.
still another hurdle they've
Yeah.
had to overcome than a white kid has to overcome.
I mean, yes. But at that point it becomes very down to the wire, and it's important not to over amplify the issue here, because then it becomes race baiting and name calling, and it actually makes the situation worse.
Okay, I think that's very interesting. We're just going to wrap it up because I think we're just going to be going around in circles. You've got our views. I think we'll put a poll up as well, whether or not you support the Black Lives Matter movement. Thank you very much for listening. Hope you've enjoyed, and we'll see you later.